does it feel to actually be an action figure? You've got action figures, you got Lego figures in here, right? That's got to be a little weird, right?
You know, I got asked one time on a Q&A, so Daniel, how was it like to have a toy yourself, to play with yourself? I was like, what? I was like, well, how do I rechange that answer, you know? But it's awesome. I mean, when they gave me the role of Boba, I had no clue what Star Wars was because I grew up on an island with only 3 TV channels. So I grew up in New Zealand. And I grew up in the era of episode 6 and 1. There was no Star Wars. You guys, some of you are probably in my same age group too, so you're like, yeah, I grew up in that timeline too, where
right.
you got all Star Wars.
I got it all.
You
right. I went through the whole thing.
You went through the great days. I forgot what I was saying.
You're freaky.
I'm already on my next story.
Yeah, you were talking about the movies getting the role, and you weren't a Star Wars fan.
Yeah, that's right.
When you got the role, you didn't really know anything about it.
So I had no clue that Star Wars actually produced, or George Lucas produced the type of figures and the toys that he did. So I finished filming, and then they gave me a call and they're like, hey Daniel, we're gonna send you a box of your figures. And I'm like, what? So I was one of the first people to get the episode 2 little Boba Fett. I didn't realize that I should probably keep on to this and not give them away to all my friends at school. So I was in my garage. My very first signing was me in my garage. I was giving away all my figures, and I was giving them all my friends in my school. So like I lost the whole box, and I probably would have made a fortune on right now, right? But I never had an idea of not only was Star Wars gonna gave me an opportunity to say, wow, I'll be molded in plastic for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? Those things are hard to get rid of.
Right. So, did you become a fan after that?
You know what? I think like anybody that has been introduced to Star Wars, you become an instant fan straight away. I mean, Star Wars is, the story is able to touch different people in different ways, you know, from different characters, I feel. But before, like I said, there was no Star Wars when I grew up, so I had no clue what Star Wars was. Actually, the funny thing was, when I went for the audition, they asked me, have I ever seen Star Wars? And I said, no. So they looked at me like, where have you grown up all your life? And I'm like, well, in a hobbit hole in New Zealand, obviously. And then I think with the audition process, you had 5,000 children that, yeah, I know Star Wars. Oh, yeah, I know Star Wars. And this one little savage down in New Zealand was like, I don't know. And I had no clue what it was. And I think it was great because it gave me an unbiased viewing of characters and the story of Star Wars, basically. But now, I'm like one of the biggest Star Wars fans there are. I have probably close to like 30,000 Star Wars collectibles. Yeah, I have a group actually. It's called Bounty Boxes on Facebook, and I've been. Well, my wife's like, baby, you have a lot of Star Wars. Maybe you might want to try to see if some of your fans might want to buy them. So I'm like, sure, yeah, let's try it. So I started Bounty Boxes, and then it's just growing incredibly. But it's kind of hard, you know. You give up some of your collectibles, and then you'll. Yeah.
I get the same thing for my wife too.
Wives, oh, I tell you, they're worth it. I tell you. But you know, I love Star Wars. I think Star Wars is the greatest thing on earth. I used to sit there and say, you know, in some of these countries that they were having, you know, issues with bombs, they just need to send some stormtroopers and some Jedis over there, you know? You can't be serious when you got those things all walking around, you know, and it's a good time, so.
It's cool. It's interesting, though, you brought up the point, like, coming into it not as a fan, though, I can see how that might have been, because Boba Fett is this character that always has a special place in the hearts, you know, of all the fans, and so if you had known that going into it, I could see how that might have just been like extra pressure, but since you didn't have to really deal with that.
Oh, if I knew how fan base of Star Wars was going into it, I would have said, no thank you, I don't want this role, Boba Fett. So I came off of episode 1. Well, episode 1 had just got aired, right? So the stories were changing, people's ideas and everything else were rocked almost.
Yeah.
Because you're like, that wasn't what I was thinking of Star Wars. Then episode 2 comes along and it's this love story.
Yeah.
I had to get the love story. Right?
Yeah, but you know what? I think Attack of the Clones gets too much grief. Way too much grief.
Oh, that's what I was about to say. You should have heard the fans when I first came out. And they're like, you're not our Boba Fett. What? They should not even taken that helmet off. Yeah, like, yeah. Oh. Well, me and Jake Lloyd both got it. But I grew up with my 2 big brothers that beat me up my whole life. So from New Zealand, you know, it's just one of those savage islands where you're like, all right, well, you want to talk about me? Come on, then let's fight. And they're like, what? I didn't realize being a celebrity, you know, I meant to tell your fans that, 13 years old, I'm like, you want to pick on me? Okay, come on then. And then, I had to realize really quickly, like, Star Wars is very passionate.
Yeah,
and it's
it
a
is.
very, very big thing that's touched the world, so.
And Boba Fett, that character, I guess I can see some of that. I think some of the problem is what made Boba Fett such a cool character in the original days was the mysteriousness, right? And so you show his face. It's like when they gave Wolverine an origin finally, right? It's like it takes away from it, right? It's that kind of and then maybe that's some of it.
That was a lot of it,
I think.
And you gotta remember that Boba Fett is a fan-made character.
Right.
So like, he wasn't even meant to be a bounty hunter. But then they were like, how am I gonna make 200 Boba Fett looking guys in white prototype armor?
Right.
It's gonna take too long, cost too much. So then they just stripped him away, put in the Stormtroopers, which were a lot easier to mold and quickly make. But then they gave Boba Fett the position as a bounty hunter. Well, then the fans took on this character and loved him so much because he was just so little of him in Star Wars that you were able to create your own backstory.
Yeah.
And he's literally the backstory man of Star Wars.
That's a great way to put it too. And I'll tell you, as someone who lived through that era, right? I will date myself here a little bit. I actually saw the Hollywood special as it aired, like the one time.
Oh.
Like I was 6 years old, I was little, right? But it was at that time, it was anything new Star Wars.
Anything. The Ewoks, the Ewok storyline, the droids.
And in that, of course, was the Boba Fett. That was the first appearance of Boba Fett in this cartoon. And the next day at school, that's all we were talking about was this Boba Fett cartoon. Oh, this is Boba Fett, right? Because here's the introduction of the character. This is probably going to be the first character that's going to be in Star Wars 2. Right, at that time, nobody even knew what the name was going to be, right?
Exactly, because it was just called Star
Wars, right? And so that character right away had this kind of mystique that no other character in Star Wars had.
Right.
But you're right, there's so little of it. We're all already inventing stories about him in our heads, right, as kids. Right?
And he's so very militant-like, and I think that's why a lot of the military people have attached to Boba Fett as well. Also, law enforcement, just all the stuff that he has, all those pockets, it's like, what kind of person has all this stuff when you think about it,
It's so cool, and, it's kind of a bummer you got a taste of Star Wars, right? And then really didn't get to do anything for a while, but then you got the call to come do Clone Wars. What was that like? Yeah, because now you're a fan, right?
Oh, I was a fan straight after filming. After the film, it took me to a whole other world, and I love Star Wars. Like it is my life, Boba Fett became just as part of me as Daniel is,
So getting the call to do Clone Wars and then come back and do reprise the role.
That was cool. So I used to see Dave Filoni, he's the director of the Clone Wars, now Bad Batch and all the rest. And if he was buying a meal or whatever at the hotel, I'd run up real quick and be like, I got this, and I'll pull out my credit card and be like, try to see if this one works, and I get the call. Hey, we want you to come back and reprise Boba. I'm like, what? So I say to him, I'm like, dude, I didn't think buying you all those meals would have, got me a job. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, dude, all the meals I buy at the conventions and stuff, like me bribing you, that was not how I got my role? He goes, no. What happened was George Lucas, they didn't know where to go with the story of the Clone Wars, and they were having a difficult time with it because it was epic, So George apparently opens the door, walks in the room, and says to them, I want Boba Fett in the Clone Wars, call Daniel Logan. Yeah. That's like God calling you back to heaven when you lost your wing. You know what I mean? And for me, I thought that was even better. I still get goosebumps, I'm like, the fact that man still thinks of me and still knows my name.
That's cool.
I'd go to premieres and I thought he forgot me. My dad, he's got this look to him. So he'd walk up to my dad like, how you doing? And I'm like, huh? George, I was in your movie. Hey, how you doing? Like, he just walks on by. I'm like, I got to talk to him when I was working for him. But no, he's a lovely man, George. He is my God. I have 2 prayers at night. I pray one to God and then I pray one to the other God, George Lucas. My prayer sometimes like, Lord, please make George Lucas think about me again. Then my next one is, George Lucas, I hope you're thinking about me again. You never know.
And with the way things are going with the franchise now, and they're jumping around in the chronology in different places, potentially there's a possibility even for we're just throwing it out there. For obviously, you know, the character's been reintroduced, you know, older character in
Tim Whittemore,
you know, and but there's a possibility. I mean, there could be a live action Boba Fett down the road set earlier in the chronology where maybe potentially you could play it. Has that? I know you've probably thought about that possibility, but
there's plenty of possibilities now. You know, with all the clones that have come to the world of Star Wars, it's me and my brothers and sister. Now,
right.
Sorry, hopefully you guys have both seen it.
Yep, spoiler, right? I got you.
Sorry. Sorry, guys. I know I get ADHD. I don't even think. I just like, oh, yeah. Well, I guess her name's Omega, and my name is now Alpha. Sounds pretty good to me. I'll take it. I'm like, Alpha?
Right.
Sweet.
Right.
No, but so they started exploring different like avenues of not only the clones, but then also Camino and the cloning processes again and stuff like that. And I think they're picking out some of the greatest stuffs of all of the prequels. Yeah. And they're revisiting the new fandom and fan base, which is kind of my era, is in the 30s, you know, early 40s.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I really like to start going back to like Hoth or, you know what I mean? Like these places that, as an original fan, you got to explore because there was no thing like that back in the day.
Right, there was nothing like
You know?
yeah, absolutely. All right, I know we're gonna get some questions about Star Wars, so I wanna ask you about a couple of non-Star Wars things. Let's
All right.
just a few. So, how did you get your start? I was reading it actually had to do with that you were a rugby player, right? And you ended up getting a commercial as playing a rugby player, is that?
Yeah, you never know how you'll get in the world of Star Wars. So, I used to play rugby. I was a really good little rugby player. My coach put down my name and his son's name, because each coach at our year level was only allowed to put down 2 names. And it was for a milk commercial. So I walk in and as soon as I get in the door, I hear this person, oh, he's too white. And I'm like, what? What is this? Like, this is terrible, right? But I was meant to be playing an original All Black who was a Samoan, who was obviously a lot darker, and I'm meant to be playing his young son, younger him. So, like I do, I just stopped talking, and they fell in love with me. So then they were like, wait, can you see, how about we give you another role? And I was like, okay, what do you need? So they said, well, can you dive into the ground as if like you're diving into like a puddle of mud or something like that? So we're in a concrete floored, you know, rugby club, and I just jump off my feet straight in my face, you know, and like that, and they're like, oh, yes! That's how I got my first job. So this lady, she really liked me at the commercial. And she says to my mom, like, oh, hey, your son, he's got some talent, can I get him some more work? You know, I'd really like to help him get some more work. So my mom's like, well, how much do you pay? No, I'm joking. No, so she ends up getting me so much work that she had to get me an agent. And then that's when my agent was she was like an auntie to me. She was like, call me every day, hey, I got an audition, oh, I got this. And 9 times out of 10, I was getting everything she sent me for. So I wasn't that I was getting cocky, but I just figured, all right, well, here's another audition, just send me the audition and I'll get it. And she's like, no, you don't understand. You're not gonna get this. She's like, but we will be able to sell you as the kid that auditioned to be that kid in Star Wars. So I was gonna benefit off it anyway. You know, I was like, man, I auditioned for Star Wars. Right. You know what I mean? Like, how many kids would have wanted and wished to have that dream? Right. So yeah, the casting director, she had me come in, and she was like, do you have any special talents? I just seen episode 1. Right. So I thought I was gonna be playing Darth Maul, or a Darth Maul character. So I tell her, oh, I can do the Taiaha. She's like, ooh, American, right? She's like, ooh, what is the Taiaha? You know, like, oh, the Taiaha, that's our New Zealand native stick that we used to fight with and, you know, get her all excited, right? She's like, well, I was like, do you want me to show you? And she's like, well, yeah, go ahead. I'm like, well, do you have a stick? Because I knew we were in the nicest hotel in New Zealand. I'm like, she's not gonna have a broomstick anyway. She's like, she kind of bluffs me and she goes, no, this is Star Wars. Just pretend like you have one in your hands. I'm running around this really nice room, like I'm the Star Wars kid off YouTube, you know, with the imaginary lightsaber in my hand, like, oh, and I'm like running around and she's just moving the camera, like thinking, this is Star Wars. This is the kid. I had no clue. She's like, we'll see you and speak to you in about 3 or 4 months. I'm a little smarter than I look, so I'm like, yeah, right, you're not calling me, but hey, thanks for being polite on the way out. My brother, we used to play PlayStation together, and we used to play Grand Theft Auto, but because I can't focus for too long, I don't want to do the missions. I just want to go and steal the cars and do all that fun stuff, you know? My brother used to get really mad at me for that. So I was messing around, and instead of clubbing me, he just says to me, hey, I gotta tell you something. I'm like, what? He goes, dude, you got Star Wars. And I gave goosebumps again. I just remember throwing the controller. And this is still back in the day when it was corded to the PlayStation, right? I was like, what? No way! So I started running out the door. My brother's like, get back here. And I'm like, what? He goes, dude, you can't tell anybody. I was like, what are you talking about? And this is my brother who's like 3-4 years older than me. So he beat me up a lot of my life. And I'm like, and he messed with me all my life. So I'm like, what? And he's like, dude, you got the role, but they just can't tell you yet. They think that you have a big mouth and you might leak this story. I was like, we have a big mouth? What? They were very smart. So that was the day I found out. So I ran around, running around. When my mom told me, she pulled me in the kitchen. I'm like, oh, I'm in trouble. And she sits me down. She was my mother and my father. So she was like, you got the role. I was like, what? She's like, I'm proud of you. Just like that. Man, there was no like, son, our lives have changed forever. You hit the lotto. Like, it was just like, you got it, and I'm proud of you. I'm like, wow, thanks. Could you imagine having to keep your mouth shut for 2.5 years while your movie was still being made after you'd filmed?
Wow.
That was my pickup line. Could you imagine all the girls I could have got with that pickup line? You know who I am? Who? Boba Fett. They're like, who?
Still sounds cool, man. So it's funny, you mentioned like you jumped around for to be Darth Maul. I've heard that you actually trained with Ray Park, right?
Yeah.
You trained martial arts with Ray Park, and for a long time, right?
So
back in the day.
I've been blessed.
Yeah.
You know, Peter Mayhew was became like an uncle to me. Kenny Baker was like an uncle, raised like more like a brother. So he took me under his wing, and we did martial arts for like almost 8 years together, solid. And then on and off. Once he started working on G.I. Joe and then all the other stuff, and then I ended up having a kid, so he now is taking all my time and my fitness too. So he's hard work just chasing around the kids. I don't want to go to the gym or work out after that. I'm like, dude, when the kid sleeps, I sleep.
What did you train? What styles?
He trained us everything. So he taught me wushu, which allowed me to get my butterfly twist down, to be able to twist and everything like how he does. But we did a lot of mixed before the UFC blew up. So we were doing like some days we'll work out in the pool doing resistance training. You know, it was always hitting, always punching or kicking or doing something. Right. So I walk in, it's beautiful ladies, and I'm like, hi guys. They're like, oh hi, oh you joining us? How great! I'm all, yep, I'm joining you guys. And I knew I was a pilot, so I'm like, I think I'll be the pilot. So they were excited, I was excited. They end up going to lunch, and the Sharknado guys are like, we have 1 hour to do these shots. We need to get in there and do it now. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It wasn't the Sharknado set, it was Pan Am set that we robbed on their lunch break.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
And could you imagine? They're looking at me like, oh, man, lunch is almost over. And I'm in the cockpit, they got this, you know, cigar in my mouth, yeah, you know, doing my thing. But I'm like, dude, 1 hour, movie magic is amazing.
That's hilarious. That's a lot.
But those Sharknado guys, they're incredible. The only place I ever get that question is in Germany. Daniel Logan, you in the Sharknado? I was like, I was in love it.
Awesome.
Like, oh man.
That's fun. All right, well, let's pitch that to the audience. Get some questions out here.
Perfect.
Yeah, good. What do we got?
So, how was it work with Kevin Sorbo in Hercules?
Ah,
Yeah, he was on Friday.
boy. So that was a great opportunity in New Zealand. For me, working on Hercules was the coolest thing in the world because they actually didn't just go down to the store and buy you t-shirts or buy you Nike shoes. There was a seamstress tailor making every single thing on that set. And when you walked behind the studio walls and into it, it was everywhere. They filmed outside, they filmed inside. So, you know when they had like the courtyard shots? They were all outside. So when you walked into Hercules. All that set. And it took you automatically there. I got to work, my sets were with Kevin Smith, who passed away. He did the fall, and he did a stunt fall, and he actually passed away from it. So I got to be this little demon child, and my name was Zolin, and I turned into this demon, and the father's like, "I'm sorry, won't you forgive me?" And he's kneeling down, and I'm like, "Never!" And then my eyes turned, and my face turned into a demon, and I'm like, boom! And like it, and what happened was, I accidentally smacked the guy on the scene. I'm like, he's like, "Yeah, just come closer, whatever." And I just whacked him by accident. And he's like, I'm so sorry. He's like, "No, it's okay. It's okay." I'm like, I'm not gonna be working here for very long. But yeah, Kev, he's a great guy. We get to travel all over the world together. So watching his struggles and stuff like that in life too, with his health, I wondered when I first met him, like, where did the Hercules go? But dealing with his health issues, he wasn't able to work out. He lost a lot of muscle. So, but he's a good guy.
Yeah, had a great panel with him on Friday, so we talked about a lot of that. Actually, yeah, you crashed one of our panels on Friday, Greg Sykes' panel.
I'm sorry,
No,
guys.
that was great.
I was calling
It
the...
was hilarious. I should tell this story, right? So we're sitting here doing the panel from our end, right? And all of a sudden his phone rings, and he's like, "Oh, hang on a second, that might be my mom." "Oh, it's Daniel Logan. Hey, Daniel," right? And so I don't know if any of y'all were here for that panel, but yeah, so you got to say hi to a lot of the
Greg
fans here on
Sykes is
Friday.
awesome.
That was fun. That was a lot of fun.
He should have his phone off.
Yeah, well, we see. Actually, we kind of planned. We're like, "Hey, we need to have you come crash Daniel's panel on Sunday."
He
So,
should have.
Yeah, that would have been fun.
That's another thing about Star Wars is that I got so many different friends now from different movies or TV shows that I've never seen, but they're just wonderful people. Like Greg, he is the greatest. "Hey, bro. Hey, man." I'm like, "Man, whatever you're on, I need to get on that too." He's like, "No, I'm just on my green juice, man. Just green juice." I'm like, "What? Like green juice?"
Yeah.
He gave me some. It tasted terrible. Hopefully he doesn't hear that. He's like, "Just pound it, pound it." I'm all, yeah, it was disgusting. That was bad.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. Yeah, after he hangs up, "Oh, Daniel, he is the most amazing soul in the universe. He is the light." He was saying all this incredible stuff about you after you got
We pay each other off. You see? We pay each other off. He's a good guy. He's really a great guy.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
I worked with him actually on a film in China.
Oh.
So we were going over to China, and I ended up being sitting next to him, and I'm like, "Oh, what are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm going to go and film this thing." I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to go and film." So we found out we're actually filming the same thing. And he's sitting there. Oh, this was the flight from the Philippines to China. He had this disgusting, like, fruit that he was like, this is like world, I forget what he calls the stuff. I had to sit next to him. This thing stunk so bad. And he's like, "Do you want some?" Come on. No way. It looked like a mango dry, but it wasn't. And then I'll never forget that one.
Go ahead.
What's your question, my brother?
Hi, I was just wondering if, because you got to hold Django's helmet in your own two hands, and I'm sure as a child you've asked the question, was there anything that you were able to grab from the set of episode 2? Any props, anything? Because Star Wars has a lot of
That's
props.
why they hired me. They knew I wouldn't steal anything. If only I knew, I would have stolen every single thing that wasn't locked down, Do you know how much Jango Fett's pistols go for nowadays? The ones in the, ridiculous. Like, we're talking probably $100,000 or $200,000 for his pistols. I would have stolen everything. Well, I did actually get something, actually. So, Rick McCullum, remember I hadn't seen Star Wars, right? Episode 1 didn't have stormtroopers. So I go into Rick McCullum's office, who was the producer. And he's got the stormtrooper. I'm like, "Oh, that's a really cool, what is this?" And he's like, "Oh, that's a stormtrooper." I'm like, "Oh man, I've always wanted a stormtrooper." So he sent me his stormtrooper that they used in the remakes,
Right,
in the 90s.
Yeah.
He sent it to me. So I have a stormtrooper.
Wow.
I was also meant to be on episode 3. So when I went down to the set, they were just tearing apart the lava from the lava scene of, "Anakin, you are like my brother," So my dad kind of figured out what it was, and I didn't know. I was just like, "Yeah, they're just dumping the trash." So he asked me to go ask Rick, if I can steal or take some of the stuff out of the trash can. Rick says, as soon as it's in the trash, it no longer belongs to us. Can you imagine how much stuff from Star Wars is in the landfill of Sydney, Australia? Like, you've got probably the whole entire prequels, because they just destroyed them after we built them. Wow. You know, Slave 1 was built, not the outside, the whole entire cockpit was built. Do you know how much I would have got for that? Imagine stealing the Slave 1 out of there.
See, I'm an archaeologist by day, so I'm just here to, let's go dig it up. What are we doing?
Exactly. No,
Right?
exactly.
Let's go, right?
I think about it. I think about it all the time, like how much stuff is in landfill. Yeah. But so I have that, and then I have the lava and some blue screen from episode 3 that I got out of a trash can, a big dumpster. I dumpster dive for Star Wars props.
Very cool.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, bud.
The question about the head, I think I saw you talking sometime about that scene where you were holding the head. You didn't really realize what was going on with that when you were shooting it, right?
No, I never knew that Jango Fett got his head chopped off until I watched it at the premiere. It would be kind of gory to be like, hey kid, can you hold this helmet? Your dad just got his head severed off, and it actually came out of the helmet, so it's somewhere in the arena. You know what I mean? People ask me all the time, did the head come out of the helmet? Oh, the head come out of the helmet. The helmet come out of...
Yeah, you had it right.
Did I have it right?
You did.
It's been a long weekend. And then I ended up going and looking at episode 2 and realizing there was a shadow that leaves the helmet. That's how much detail George Lucas puts into his films. That's why they take so long to make.
Very cool.
How old were you when you got the role of Boba Fett? Because I think I may have been the same age as you were.
I was 13 years old. And today I am 34 years old.
Because I remember at the time, it was like a 3-year prior, and it was like worth the wait.
I remember the waits too. You had 3 years to get excited, you know what I mean? And then they come out with My Love Story, and you're like, I waited 3 years for this? No, I'm joking.
No,
I get my own movie a hard time as well. But no, yeah, those were the great days when you had those 3 years to know that you were waiting, you know, and then it was 4 years for every celebration, I think, at that time. Now they're like every year.
You should have seen the middle schoolers.
My school was pretty, so I was allowed to tell people when it came out. So my whole school went and watched it together. And then the next day I was like the coolest, most famous kid in school. Like, hey Daniel, I'm all, who's that? Hey Daniel, I'm all, who's that? You know, like, oh, so you can start getting, hey buddy, how you doing, pal? You know,
Yes, thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
for being part of my life, and thank George Lucas for choosing you.
Thank you so
thank you.
much. I really appreciate your words. Thank you. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey.
My question is about Clone Wars. So
Perfect.
In the original version of season 7, where we got to see the unfinished episodes, they had that big climactic showdown between Boba Fett and Cad Bane. So what did you think about that when it was?
Well, we had like 5 or 6 episodes. The build up and then after.
I've only ever seen the actual clip of the showdown.
That's what, imagine how I feel. Samuel L. Jackson says he doesn't want to be killed by a punk kid. I happen to be the punk kid, so there goes episode 3. Do you know what I mean? That's my life right there. No, but the Clone Wars, I'm forgetting this question again.
It was about the showdown with the
Oh, yeah. So the Clone Wars, what happened was, once the takeover happened, there were certain things that the mouse doesn't really advertise, like kids killing. And that was basically the premise of why I was told all those episodes got taken away. When I got the scripts for them, I started to tear up, like literally tear. Because what they did to the character and how I was able to explore him in this whole new world and what they were giving to me. Like, I can't tell you guys, it sucks, even though I don't know if they're ever gonna come out, I still have to keep the secret, right? You know, and it's like Star Wars, I just wanna tell everything, and like, the whole build-up. I mean, one of the arcs was we go into this underground, it's like an underground city of caves. You know, and I'm trying to hunt down Cad Bane through these tunnels, you know, getting to bounty hunt, you know, and how Boba Fett got his armor. Because as we saw in a few episodes before, he blew up the helmet, his Jango Fett helmet that he had, in order to try to kill Mace. But I hope they come out one day. I mean,
they do exist, right? I mean,
unfinished, that's the only
right.
problem.
I mean, but all the voices have been done and all
All the
that,
voices, yeah.
so it could theoretically happen, you know.
I mean, It was the coolest thing in the world to read those scripts. I mean, what they were gonna do with Boba was badass.